yeah, they built with what they had, and when the bricks ran out, they went to the marketplace to see if there were some cheaper bricks for sale, and if that was the case, they would buy as many as they could and then continue building. But that means that a lot of different types of bricks were used in the building of this church. As you can see on the left here, you can see more of the reddish classical Dutch bricks, and on the right you can see more limestone-y bricks. A lot of famous Delft citizens are also buried in this church. Yeah, people like Anthony Butter. They sold it all here on top of the Butter Bridge, which of course is also named after what it was traded on there. This is also the longest bridge in Delft, over 100 meters long. Okay, so Delft's not only known for its beautiful scenery, but also because there is a very important painter that was born here. Does anybody know who I'm talking about? Very famous Dutch painter? Yes, of course, it's Johannes Vermeer. And he was born here in Delft on the Volders canal, but that is a canal that's a little bit too small for us to sail through today. But in a moment we will get a little bit of a sneak peek through our ride to this little peephole of where he used to live. He was born on number 25, and that house is now a museum about his life. And you could, yeah, Delft, the city center is not that big, so if you want some more entertainment, you could always go there if you want to. To the right here is the Volders canal. Yeah, but Johannes Vermeer was not the only famous Delft citizen to live on this street. I also live there, so if you want, you can also come by for coffee when I'm done working. 1 square meter, you bury him vertically. So Johannes Vermeer, there's always a saying like Johannes Vermeer would turn in his grave if he saw this, but he really can't. He spins in his grave. And you can see here a window that has been completely closed off with bricks, and the reason why that is because back in the day, in 1615, I think, there was a very big explosion in the center of Delft, remain as it is. So now the whole city center of Delft is monumental, which means that it has to be rebuilt into its original state. But by the time that law came around, these buildings were already built, so these are also monumental. They will never change. We survived. No beer for me. Yeah, I'm already at 1, but we have the whole day remaining, so I'll be fine, I think. I do have school tomorrow, so it might not be the best idea. But we've now entered the Kolk Harbor, or the Whirlpool Harbor as it's called in English. This is one of the oldest harbors in Delft, and as you can see, the bridge in front of us, it is tilted a bit towards the north. That's because all these ships from The Hague and Leiden would come in from there. So you U-turn, you of course make a bit of a whirlpool in the water, and that's where the name Whirlpool Harbor comes from. Then in a moment on the right hand side we see the Gerels House. This was the old mental institute of Delft, but it was also kind of a zoo, because people, they could pay an entry price to see how these, well, crazy people lived back in the day. That's what they called them. Which of course sounds a bit cruel, but it was really the only way they could make money to buy food and clothing for these people. Fine job for having driven this boat only in November last year for the last time, I think. En nu naar voren. Yeah. Yes. We're going through, no problem. Yeah. If you look around you, you can see some cars that are parked very close to the water. I am always happy that my car floats, because it's this boat. Yeah, I always pity them. I don't want to do that parking job there, but the first question I asked myself when I came to Delft was, how often does such a car fall into the water? And I might want to ask you the same question on a yearly basis. How often do you think a car falls into the water?
50.
It's 5 times I hear here.
50.
More or less?
50.
It's less, yes, it's less. It's only 2 a year, so that's not even that much. There used to be 4, but there was a woman living in Delft, and she drove her car 2 times into the water each year. But she moved now. Now in Delft, they weren't really that creative with their names back in the day. But it's also where Delft gets its name from, because Delft is derived from the Old Dutch word delven, which is another word for canal digging. And you can maybe connect the dots there yourself between Delven and Delft. Yeah, the reason why they started digging these canals is to lower the water levels, and they could have some dry soil to build their houses on. That's because the water level in the Netherlands is so high because everything is. Then in a moment in front of us we can see one of the most beautiful sights of this whole tour. It's the tower of the old church, and you might have already seen it because it's leaning quite heavily, actually leaning towards the right. It's 2 meters towards the right and 1.5 meters towards us. The tower of your church is supposed to be like the best part of your city, and such a crooked tower is not something you can really be proud of. And it started tilting already during the building process, so they wanted to make it seem like it was standing upright, and they put some optical illusion shape that way. But also the rightmost towers are a lot taller than the left ones, giving the tips at the making the tips have the same height. And then there are 2 more. Should I just tell you, maybe? Yeah, the clock's not straight, and yeah, indeed. Yeah, you can see that by looking at the white artwork around the clock. You can see at the left-hand side it's a bit taller than the right-hand side, or longer, I must say. And then a bit harder to see, but also very clearly there, is that the 2 red lions holding up the clock, or the rightmost red lion is a bit taller than the left one. Otherwise, I might need to find a new house. Yeah, and when the Netherlands was occupied by the German forces during the Second World War, a lot of these tower bells were taken from the churches to be molten into like weapons and such. But this bell was a bit too big, and they didn't manage to take it out. So this is one of the only bells still in its original state in the Netherlands. Yeah, we're coming up on a bit of a narrow part of the canal. This is because when they started building this church, they found out that the tower would come into the canal. One struck the heart, so he's dead on impact, but 2 of them are still visible in the monastery walls to this day. Inside of this monastery is now a beautiful museum. It's called Prinsenhof, and I would really recommend you go there if you have the time today. It's a beautiful museum about the life of William of Orange and also about other national Dutch history. Then on the right hand side, if you haven't already, I would really recommend you get out your cameras now, because this is my favorite building in the entire city center. It's called the Hoogheemraadschap, and this is the place where the Dijklords used to work and live. Dijklords were very rich families because they were involved. They were responsible for the taxation of all the people that use the waterways in Delft. And you can see their logos or their signs still above the door frame on the right hand side. They were not only responsible for the taxation, but also for all the water levels in the canals, because if the water level was too high, then the boats could no longer go under the bridges, and then the whole city of Delft would come to a halt, which would be, of course, a very big shame. Hello. So we've already seen the oldest house in Delft. If you remember, that was the blue one, but now we have a pink one coming up on the right. It's not the youngest house, it's the smallest house in Delft. It was the house of the personal doctor of William of Orange. Peter van Foreest was his name. And as you can see, there's a funny thing about it. It has 2 front doors. But one of them, actually the right one, is not a front door, that's actually a gate to the garden. So from the inside it's even smaller than it looks from the outside. You go on achter. Because this is the lowest bridge of the tour today, so I want to thank you all for coming to this on this canal tour today. Because if we were not enough people on board and there's rained a lot, then students, they still try to drink beer all day, but they don't really manage as well as they did back in the day. Yeah, there's a bit of a Dutch saying which included cats, dogs and ducks, so you can maybe imagine where we got the inspiration from to paint all those chaotic paintings. It's because it's now the biggest student association of Delft, and it's someone waving at us from inside. Behind. It was also the first company to ever issue stocks, so they created the stock market of in some way. And this was their headquarters right here in Delft, with the logo still in the facade, like in the top you see the VO and the C and the D, it stands for Delft. It took me a surprisingly long time to figure that out. But the East Indian Trading Company, they had a big army to suppress the natives, of course, in the colonies. They were not really nice guys. And you can see a beautiful sculpture of the war god Mars here, and that's because this was the place where the army stored all their weapons. This was the old armory. And you can see how big this building is, so you can imagine how huge this army used to be. Then on the right hand side you can also see a beautiful building with a lot of East Indian Trading Company logos. You can see yourself, of course. is the canal that connects Rotterdam to The Hague, and it goes right past Delft. This is also what made Delft such a good place for the East Indian Trading Company to be, because it's right close to the sea, but also not too close to be attacked so easily. But this was, if you look to our right, we can see a big harbor. This was one of the most important harbors in Delft, if not the most important, because like all the big expedition ships, they docked 8 kilometers that way in a harbor in Rotterdam. But they would load their goods and their spices into little ships, and they would all dock in here to bring into the city, and also go from the way we went into the city to trade all their stuff. Okay, so I think 2 people are going to the Royal Delft Museum. That's you two? Okay, so we're dropping you off in a moment, and then we'll continue the tour for the rest of the people on board. And you are coming back a quarter before 2, right? You're coming on the bike, or the tuk-tuk. Okay, if it is sometimes possible that they don't ride on Mondays, so then you need to call us and we'll pick you up from the same place. Yeah. And it's called the Widow's Bridge because all the wives of the sailors, they would gather on top of this bridge to welcome their men back home. But of course a lot of men did not return from these expeditions because these were quite dangerous, and that's why it's called the Widow's Bridge. It's because, well, this person living here couldn't pay his taxes anymore, and these taxes were of course determined by how many windows you had. So they came around and they closed off his windows until he had enough money to pay his taxes. The person living there now, he wanted to open up that window again to have some more light in his living room, but he wasn't allowed to by the Dutch municipality, or the municipality of Delft, because of course the whole city center of Delft is monumental and it needs to be restored. Right next to the large grey building. Does everybody see it? Because there is something missing from this building that's quite essential if you want to enter your home. So here on the right hand side, right next to the big grey building, does anybody already see what is missing? Yeah, I think you know. It's the front door. It's quite essential if you want to enter your house. But the person living here, he was quite clever and he read the rules very carefully. And he saw that the front of your house was defined by where your front door was. And you only had to pay taxes over the front of your house. So he put his front door in the back of his house, meaning he only had to pay taxes over the back side of his house where there were no windows at all, making him one of the first tax evaders of the Netherlands. And that's a tradition we all embraced very happily.